Thank you for listening. This is the Wyoming Photographic Podcast. All things photography from the state of Wyoming, featuring Wyoming-based photographers as well as photographers who travel from all over the world to photograph this wonderful state. I am your host, Jeff Futter, and we have an amazing show in store for you. Today we've got Ben Bluhm with us. Ben, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. Thanks for asking.
Good. And can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I grew up in Massachusetts. I lived there for my whole life until I graduated high school. Moved out west and have been in the kind of Rocky Mountain West for the last nearly 10 years. I work day job as a product marketing manager for an insurance company and do photography any moment I get outside of that. So I have a dog. He's very cute. His name is Brady, and I just love anything outdoors.
Great. And what are some places in and around Wyoming you'd love to go to take pictures?
Grand Teton National Park and Yellowstone. I have a lot of other places that I'd like to go, but those are the ones that I go back to all the time.
Now, who would you consider to be your favorite photographer out there? Who do you get your inspiration from?
Whew. There's a few out. There's photographers that aren't in Wyoming that I really take a lot of inspiration from. But I think Savannah Rose is one of my favorite photographers. Also Isaac Spots. Julia Cook is also really good. There's several people, and I like them for different reasons. But they all have really unique takes on portraying wildlife and nature, and I really think that they're really good at what they do.
What type of photography do you do?
I am mostly wildlife photography, but I do some landscape occasionally when I give myself time to.
So, what are some tips you can give for getting a tack sharp wildlife image?
Practice and equipment and being able to put yourself in the right position. So if you have the right equipment and you know how to use your camera and you're out there with like ideal light, it's hard to not get some pretty sharp images. But obviously, the closer your subject is, the easier it'll get. But really, for me, it's just been a trial and error practice over the last several years.
So, what kind of gear do you use?
So I have a Canon R5 that I just got and a Sigma 60 to 600 millimeter lens.
So, how long have you been doing photography?
I've been doing photography for about 3 years.
So, do you teach any kind of workshops or anything like that? And are there any workshops in and around Wyoming that you could recommend?
I don't do workshops. I do offer as of really recently guided wildlife photography tours. I do. I mean, if people have questions, I'm more than happy to ask. But I consider myself still learning. I'm not a camera expert by any means, but I do know there's definitely other like companies out there that do photo workshops that can teach you how to use your camera really well. Like I feel like I know how to use it well enough on my own. But I focus more on trying to get people in an ideal position to find wildlife rather than teaching them how to be the best possible photographer.
Now, prior to going out and doing a photo shoot, what are some of your biggest concerns and fears?
Concerns and fears. Well, you're always concerned that you're going to get up early for nothing and that you're not going to find any animals. Fears, I don't think I have any fears. I think it's more like you always get FOMO because if you choose to be in one part of a park, like a Grand Teton, let's say you're going up north or the Pilgrim Creek area, try to find some bears, and then you find out that there were two bull moose sparring on the side of the road on the southern end of the park at Gravatt, and you always feel like if you're in one spot and you're not finding anything, then the people that are in another are going to find everything that you wanted to. And so I don't think that I have at this point any concerns or fears. I just frequently can get FOMO if I feel like I'm not in the right place at the right time.
Now, doing wildlife photography, have you ever, whether on purpose or inadvertently, put yourself in danger to get a picture?
Oh, I I don't think so. I mean, anytime that I'm around an apex predator, I'm usually really close to my vehicle or surrounded by many people that have, bear spray. I carry bear spray. The closest thing that I would say to being in danger was once I was bluff charged by a moose in Glacier, Montana. But that wasn't a hike, not necessarily out trying to do photography. But I've never felt just totally in danger. I've definitely backed up and given bears more space and tried to encourage others to do the same, but I've never been like fearful for my life, thankfully.
So what would you consider to be your biggest photographic failure, and what did you learn from it? How did you overcome that?
This is a great question, and I have a painful experience to share. So, this past January, there was a bobcat that had spooked, or what we think had spooked a deer from the top of a cliff out in Firehole Canyon, and it had been feeding on this deer carcass for several days. And a couple of my photographer friends and I had decided to go and rent, or excuse me, to book a photo tour, a public, or not a photo tour, a public tour on through Yellowstone Vacations in order for us to get the fastest, cheapest possible route to get in there, because at that time of the year you can't take a private vehicle or snowmobile into the through the west entrance of Yellowstone. And we went the whole day and did a bunch of geyser stuff and just things that we're not as into because we're wildlife photographers. And we got to Firehole Canyon the very end of the day. It'd been 8 hours, and we had about 10 minutes to take pictures of this bobcat. And I got so excited that I have a 600 millimeter lens. I zoomed in all the way. I couldn't find it, and I zoomed back out, focused my shot, and I ended up spending that entire encounter shooting at 300 millimeters instead of 600. And all of the images that I have are really not my favorite images. If I had simply zoomed in, I probably would have been a lot more happy with how that turned out. But because I was just so excited, super nervous, I never stopped to think like, okay, check my settings, check my focal length, all that stuff. And so what I learned from that is that there is never going to be an encounter or an interaction with wildlife that that should cause you to not employ your normal process and routine. And the way that you approach a bison should be the same way that you approach a bobcat, in the sense that you need to have the right settings. You need to be able to stay focused and stay really just in the zone, because if you're not, you're going to end up regretting it like me. And so I ended up with what I consider lackluster images from a very rare encounter, because I was too flustered in the moment to stay focused and stay true to what I do when I go out and shoot other things.
Now, can you tell me, are there any places specifically within Yellowstone that you like to go to get wildlife photos?
I spend a lot of my time in the upper half of the northern loop of Yellowstone between Mammoth Hot Springs and Cook City. I That's about a 47-mile stretch of road that really you can kind of find everything up there. I Other hot spots are like by the east entrance, Sylvan Pass area. There's decent grizzly activity over there. And in the spring, I really like the Roaring Mountain, like Norris Junction area for early spring grizzlies. But for the most part, I'm up north. Usually stay pretty tight up in that area. Dunraven Pass is also great in the spring. But yeah, I think the place that I spend the most time would definitely be the upper half of the northern loop of Yellowstone.
I need to get to Yellowstone more often. It's kind of sad. I live here in Riverton. That's about a 3 hour drive from the Teton entrance. And I've been there. I can count on one hand how many times I've been to Yellowstone, which is, as a photographer, is kind of, um, there's no excuse for it.
For sure. It's a
How do you
great place. It's my favorite place.
how do you feel about black and white photography?
I that's something I would like to learn more and like kind of get into more. I think that if done right, it is extremely artistic and beautiful. Um, However, I would say if you don't know what you're doing and the composition of your photo isn't ideal, I think that it can turn out worse than a color photo. But it's something that I would love to just to add into my editing repertoire because I think that it can be really quite beautiful if you're doing it in a creative, artistic way.
Now, if you could go back to when you first started photography and give yourself one piece of advice, what would that advice be?
Patience. I think that if you're not going to be a professional and be an expert overnight. You're not going to know where to find animals overnight. You're not going to be able to know how to compose a great photo overnight. You're not going to be able to learn how to edit well overnight. You're not going to be able to do everything that you want to do overnight. And for me, it's been a years long journey to go from where I was, which was just not great, to start to where I am now, which is a little bit better than that. But it's a process, it's a grind, and it's something that if you take it seriously, there's a lot of things to learn. And so if you're patient and just trust the process and put the work in, I think that you will have a much easier time with kind of like lowered expectations because I wanted to be just a pro on day one, and that it does not happen that way. You have to practice a lot.
What does your typical routine look like?
You know, when I'm out on a trip, if I'm spending time in a national park, I usually am. Everything starts the night before, where like you got to make sure all of your equipment is ready for the next day, battery and extra battery charged. Got to go to bed as early as you possibly can, just after the sun goes down, because I usually am out before the sun even rises. You got to map and plan out your route. If you hear about sightings in the area, you got to be able to kind of know before you go which way you're going to go to try to find the animal that you're trying to photograph. And then when I'm out there, like it just I try to get shots from multiple different angles, multiple different focal lengths, and then my routine when it comes to like post processing images is sporadic at best because sometimes I get right on it. I can go through the good images, edit pretty quickly, but sometimes I just keep them on my hard drive and they sit there for months. So the routine, I would say, like when I'm in the moment, when I'm ready to, when I'm going on a photography trip, it's pretty sound. But then once I capture the images, my routine is scattered at best.
So if you sit a while and you wait for wildlife and you can't find wildlife or they don't find you one way or another, do you then you said you do some landscape photography. Are there any places that you like to go when that happens to do landscape photography up there?
Yeah, I think that really I like capturing landscapes that have water in them, and so there's the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone is a great place. There's also a lot of rivers all around. Like I love the Madison River. There's plenty of places that have water, large water sources. Yellowstone Lake's also beautiful. And so yeah, I mean, if the wildlife stuff isn't working, then like one of the first places I go to is the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, and because you can never go wrong looking at those views for sure.
Now, is there any way that you specifically convey mood in a photo, whether it be different creative elements or different compositions, different colors that you try to put in it, or anything along those
Yeah,
lines?
yeah. I mean, as of recently, I've been trying to use more like vignette elements, and trying to make the images a little bit darker than they already were. Really adjusting like highlights in more of a kind of a darker way. Um, yeah, I think that is I'm kind of moving in that direction as far as like my editing style, having it be a little bit more um, vignette moody, where the area around the animal in the photo is a little bit darker than it naturally was when I captured the image.
Now, what software do you use to edit your photos with?
I use Adobe Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop, in addition to Topaz for denoise AI stuff.
How do you feel about AI when it comes to photography?
You know, I don't think that AI images are that great. I love using AI to help me refine like subtle elements within my photo, but when it comes to like AI images, I feel like they just look too fake. It's not really art, and it's like I don't know. I think some people can be proud of like, oh wow, I created this AI image, but really the AI created the AI image, and there's not a lot of creative work that goes into that. So I think we're a long way away from having AI artwork um, be something that's like pretty substantial. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it when it comes to like generating images and stuff like that.
How would you recommend somebody would go about getting started with wildlife photography?
You got to pick a place that you know has animals, whether that's Yellowstone, the Tetons, or somewhere locally. I started with a 300 millimeter Canon lens and a Canon EOS 70 Mark II. I got that lens for it was probably I think it was 150 bucks, and I got the used camera body for about 500 $600, and so it's a pretty affordable startup, but you got to be able to figure out where animals are and where they are reliably, and then you have to get out and practice. There's definitely budget options as far as equipment, but the only way that you'll actually be able to accomplish your goals is if you go out frequently and practice and get better.
Now, for you personally, what would you consider to be the best photo you've ever taken?
I think the best photo that I've ever taken was on a very cold morning, actually this past April, where we had a three wolves approach a grizzly bear on a yearling bison calf carcass that the grizzly had dragged from a frozen pond up in the northern loop of Yellowstone. And there is a moment where two of these black wolves are feet from this grizzly bear and they are staring right at it. And they kind of make a triangle, the two wolves and the bear, and the eyes of the wolves, those yellow eyes are just kind of, they're not glowing, but they're very prominent in this photo. And you can see the frost like shimmering off the back of this grizzly. And it's a very unique encounter. It's a very unique just kind of composition, this like triangle formation almost. And yeah, I think that is maybe not my best, but at least my favorite and most compelling image. But yeah, I think that one's definitely like way up there for me.
When you go out on a photo shoot, what are some essential items that you take with you other than your camera and lenses? And
Yeah. I take a backup battery. I have camera cleaning equipment. I have a plastic cover for my camera in case it rains so that my equipment doesn't get damaged. I also have a cover for my camera backpack. Also, I got to have your snacks because a lot of the times if you're in Yellowstone or the Tetons, you're going to be on the road for a little while. Also, I always carry hat and gloves. I mean, you got to prepare with your clothing for multiple different kinds of weather because you never know up in those parks. But yeah, those are just being prepared for the elements is a really huge thing for me as well.
every time you take a picture, what are some questions that you ask yourself before you take that picture?
Well, sometimes I do ask questions, and sometimes I don't. If I have the presence of mind, I'm astute enough to do so. I definitely check my settings. Got to make sure that you're not shooting at the wrong ISO or whatever. Also, just asking myself like, am I at a safe distance? Am I giving this animal enough space? And if like really trying to figure out what kind of composition I'm trying to capture based on where the animal is and like the landscape surrounding it.
Now, are there any topics that we didn't discuss that you'd like to elaborate on at all?
I think just like one thing I'd love to add is that like the purpose behind photography for me and like what I love about it is it is a great solo activity, and it's also a great thing to do with a group and with friends. For me, like the purpose and the mission and the vision of like what I'm trying to do with photography, not only is it extremely fulfilling for me personally, but I'm also trying to use these images, and also, I dabble in video. So whatever media I create, I'm trying to use that for a conservation purpose. I'm trying to help spread the message of conservation through my visual items. And so not only is it something like it's a lifestyle that now I've really just embraced it, and it's who I am. I all the time in the world that I have outside of work, I'm out doing photography, um, whenever and however I can. But the fact of the matter is that it's a hobby, but the lifestyle aspect comes in to where there is this higher purpose of trying to use what I create to make a difference with, bears, wolves, mountain lions, whatever it is, to help those animals have a future and have a real shot at trying to thrive and get back to where they were years and years ago.
I've looked through your images and I really definitely like them. They're pretty impressive, I think. Now, where would,
Thank
so
you.
you're welcome. Where would a listener go to find your work?
Primarily Instagram, it's at Ben B Wildlife. I also have a Facebook page that is the same thing, Ben B Wildlife. You're to look up Ben Bluhm Photography on Facebook. That also works. I am almost done creating a website that it's very close, but those are the two primary places. I also have a TikTok. It's also at Ben B Wildlife, but I'm not super active on TikTok.
Well, it was great having you on the show today, Ben, and it was nice to meet you. Hopefully we can do this.
Absolutely.
Hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. Super appreciate the opportunity and your time as well.
All right, and you have a great day, sir.
Thank you. You as well.
This has been the Wyoming Photographic Podcast, all things photography in the state of Wyoming. Thank you for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.